Hi, everyone. We'll get started here in a minute or so.
Hey, folks.
Hello.
Good to see you all.
Two.
Started here in just a minute or so. Got people still coming in. And if you have any colleagues who are going to be joining us, if you could just make sure that they put either their last name or their organization and their name, that will get them into the meeting. Thank you. Okay, I think we can get started, and I apologize. I had to take this meeting from a coffee shop, so hopefully you can hear me okay, and I'm coming through loud and clear. Okay, good. Thanks, Commissioner. So hi, for anyone that I might not know, my name is Katie First. I'm the Legislative Director for Colorado Counties. And earlier this summer with commissioners, we had a discussion about what keeps you up at night relating to wildfire. We identified a handful of themes that we're kind of having these deeper dive conversations on. And I'm making progress on scheduling many of those. But one of those themes was insurance. So we have arranged this meeting with Director Conway as well as Carole Walker. Mike and Carole, do you want to do a brief introduction of yourself before we jump in?
Sure. Carole, you go first.
Now, Commissioner, I always bow to you.
So I'm Mike Conway, folks, the Commissioner of Insurance. I've been in this gig for about 7 years now, 8, 9, 10, 20, I don't know. It's been a long time. But this issue is keeping me up at night too. Homeowners insurance costs. So happy to be here and talk about it. It's going to be more of a conversation. Neither Carole or I have slides. We really just wanted to come and talk with you. But Carole, I'll kick it to you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Carole Walker. I am the Executive Director of the Rocky Mountain Insurance Association. We are a trade association that represents property and casualty insurers. Most of you county commissioners know that lingo is for auto, home, and business insurance companies. So we represent for property, which we're going to be talking about mostly today, about 80 or more % of the insurance companies who insure in the Colorado marketplace. In my role as RMIA's executive director, I also have responsibility for New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. I have been in my gig for about 26 years. So a long time of dealing with, unfortunately, seeing wildfire escalate across the state of Colorado, play out in real time, the urban conflagrations that we knew it was not a matter of if, but when. You know, back in 2002, when we had the Hayman fire, to the Waldo Canyon fire in 2012 in Colorado Springs, that really was our first experience of having that Mountain Shadows neighborhood really go up in flames and work through the recovery of that. And then certainly most recently, the Marshall Fire. So we work very closely with the Division of Insurance, with the commissioner on all sorts of insurance issues that our chief regulator is always, keeping his eye. We're working very, very closely on, I know that the issues that you're concerned about from our escalating catastrophes, from, we're ranked second in the nation for hail insurance claims, third for highest wildfire risk. We are in the hardest market that we have experienced in a generation across the country. And unfortunately, Colorado is the tip of the spear because we are a high catastrophe state. And then also we are seeing some of the worst market conditions, what you're dealing with in your household budgets, your county commissioner budgets, or things that the insurance companies unfortunately have to deal with in the risk business. Everything that insurance pays for is going up in cost. So with that said, as the commissioner said, we wanted to make this more conversational. We know many of you are very educated on this topic, have a lot of questions, but we hope that we can update you on what some of the concerns are that are keeping you up at night. They're keeping me up at night, keeping the commissioner up at night. Sometimes he's keeping me up at night, asking me questions about, how we can all work together on solutions really for addressing both affordability and availability of insurance, but mostly stability and trying to keep a stable, competitive insurance market. So Commissioner always knows that I talk a little bit longer.
You're with a Zoom room full of talkers, Carole. You're in good company.
And I appreciate that. I want them to talk much more than I do.
So yeah, I have a handful of questions maybe to help get us started, but commissioners, and I know we've got some city council and fire chief friends on as well. So I'd encourage you just use the raise hand feature or the Zoom chat if you have any questions or want to add any additional comments. Oh, and Commissioner Mitchell is on it. So I'll just hand it over to you and we can skip over my questions.
Well, Katie, we'll let you ask yours for sure, but thank you. The biggest problem that I see is homeowners in Park County that are unable to get insurance at all. And myself, had a very tough decision to have to decide if I could fund a double in my cost of insurance, living on a ranch at $20,000, crazy amount of money for 1 year of insurance where I live. And so that is what people are completely exposed and could lose everything because they can't even get it, even if they had the money. Thank you.
Yeah, so Commissioner, it's a good place to start talking about the FAIR plan. Going into the 2023 legislative session, really coming out of the Marshall Fire, but even separate from the Marshall Fire, and very importantly, just to put this out there at the front end of the conversation, the availability issues and the affordability issues that we're having are not the result of the Marshall Fire. The Marshall Fire is indicative of the situation that we find ourselves in across the state and really across the western part of the country, but the affordability challenges, the availability challenges would be with us right now, regardless of whether the Marshall Fire happened. There's a little bit of a blame game that tends to happen out there amongst some communities. So I just want to make sure that I really emphasize that at the front end. But that being said, going into the 2023 legislative session, but really during the 2022 calendar year, I started to get more and more concerned that eventually we were going to potentially have availability problems in the state. And we saw that mostly the writing was on the wall, I think, because of the states in the western half of the country, in particular along the coast where they were having availability issues. We weren't having availability problems at that point. We had really throughout the state, we had a very competitive marketplace, but we also knew that because we didn't have a FAIR plan, we didn't have an insurer of last resort. One, we were going to have to get legislation through to get something stood up, but then two, it was going to take us time to actually stand up that insurer of last resort. So I really didn't want us to find ourselves in a place of crisis where we had substantial availability problems throughout the state before we were even embarking in the conversation and running legislation. So luckily, we convinced the governor that we needed to do it. And then we partnered with the industry in a lot of different ways during the 2023 session, and we got that legislation through. But Commissioner, the problems that you all are facing up there right now, and we do have pockets of the state where we're starting to have actual availability issues, is that right now the FAIR Plan isn't stood up yet. Thankfully, we got that through in 2023, but we're standing up a new insurance company. Carole's on the board of she got appointed by the governor to the FAIR Plan board. So they're, like I said, this board is standing up a new insurance company. I've pushed them to get that done by January 1st, 2025. But what that means, folks, is that in a space of a year and a half, they will have gone from legislation being passed, it's signed by the governor authorizing this to happen. The board was appointed, I think we finally got the last member of the board appointed in December of 2023. So this board this group will have stood up a new insurance company effectively in the space of a year. That is lightning fast. And they've done a ton of work. And to Carole's credit, this is all volunteer work by these board members. They're not getting paid to do this work. But they came in and they understand the importance of this for the state of Colorado. That doesn't solve your problems right now, Commissioner, I know. But at least we do have that. We have that underway, and we would be in a much worse place as we sit here right now today if we weren't already doing that work. Some of our neighboring states, for some reason, so the FAIR Plans, they're the insurer of last resort that states have really kind of put together throughout the country. There's 2 pockets of states that historically didn't create FAIR Plans for any number of different reasons. The Mountain West states, so a lot of our neighboring states don't have FAIR Plans, and then up in the Northeast, our neighboring states around us that haven't started this work are in some of them are, I think, are very concerned about the fact that they don't have FAIR Plans, and they find themselves with some availability issues popping up. But Carole, what do you want to add in there?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And yes, that 9-member appointed board by the governor is working very diligently to get the FAIR Plan stood up, to get it stood up as a true insurer of last resort. I do, as to what the commissioner said, is don't want you to also think it's going to be a panacea for all of your constituents' problems or even some of your individual problems. I know having a huge rate hike is a very tough pill to swallow. I'm a Colorado homeowner myself, and are seeing similar things instead of my HOA board. But at the same time, we really are trying to take the best practices of FAIR Plans from other states and not make some of the mistakes that they've made in other states, like in California right now, where you're seeing just thousands of policies go on the FAIR Plan and the insurer of last resort, and understanding that this is not paid for by the state. In the beginning, it is paid for assessments by insurance companies. So we also want to do everything we can to use this FAIR Plan, and the commissioner very much understands this as a pressure valve release. So Commissioner, in our county, for your folks who truly can't find insurance, the FAIR Plan will be an option for them. If it's something where they're just seeing a rate increase, and a significant rate increase, because quite frankly, insurance has been underpriced. I know it's a tough thing to think about, but insurance companies over the last decade have lost 13%. Colorado's the 3rd most expensive state for the companies to do business in, the worst profitability state. So as we have insurance companies staying in the market, even though they're limiting their capacity, we also want them to be able to pay out claims. So as we're seeing reconstruction costs, labor, everything the insurance pays for to rebuild, to repair, labor shortages, all of those things go up in price, record inflation, record reinsurance costs, which is the insurance companies have to pay for to cover themselves for catastrophic events. We need to make sure that insurance companies can still stay in this state, and then that we use the FAIR Plan really as a pressure valve release for the people who truly need it. And we know it's not just going to be wildfire risk. This policy will also cover other risks, including wind and hail. which hail is still our most expensive and pervasive insured catastrophe in Colorado. So we're going to see a lot of hail risk coming into the FAIR plan as well. So we're really trying to make sure that we balance that we keep that just as a small lever. But for you folks who need to shop around more for it, or even going to be pushed into what we call the E&S or surplus lines market, that's something where that could still be a better option for them than the FAIR plan. So as we really hope to use you guys as educators to educate your constituents, we really want to provide you whatever information we have about, yes, we know increase in rates are happening. They're happening in the double digits and even triple digits. We're also trying to separate out the gaps between what's happening in the condo HOA space. We did pass a bill last year. The commissioner was a big part of that, of studying the HOA market, especially with condominiums, House Bill 1108 that Speaker McCluskey sponsored, to really look at what's happening in that HOA market, because there's things happening in that market that are separate than what's happening in the residential property market. Then we passed the FAIR plan. It's going to take every tool in our toolbox, from the FAIR plan to stabilizing the market, bringing confidence back in our market so we can, at least stabilize those premiums. And unfortunately, as we see these cost trends continue, this escalation of risks, we're unfortunately also going to have to get used to higher premiums, both for commercial properties and for residential properties. Of course, those huge increases, that's something where I think that we really need to take a look at those properties. We also need to look at mitigation solutions that I think long-term truly are. I'm a true believer in mitigation, that we need to be on a parallel track of these insurance solutions. Some of them are just taking pressure off the market. What we really need is risk reduction solutions, which is the science-based mitigation that works. So I know I throw a lot in there, but I think the problem is it's not a silver bullet. It's a complex issue and it's a complex solution. So we need to be pulling all of those levers. And I give a lot of credit to the Division of Insurance and your legislators and trying to address the right solutions and not look at this as a one-trick pony. We need to be looking at all of these tools in our toolbox to make sure that we're actually having an impact, not doing things that we have to fix in our market, like they're doing in California, like they're doing in Florida. They're trying to fix their FAIR plans. They're trying to fix the problems that they created, some of it through legislation. So with that, I threw a lot at you, but I will absolutely take all those raised hand questions and throw it back to the commissioner as well.
Just really quick, Katie, before we go to Commissioner Delacamper. So Carole's touched on hail a couple times. And I know that we're here to talk about wildfire, but I cannot stress to everybody enough that if we're going to find affordability solutions, Carole and I disagree about that we're going to be stuck in these high insurance premiums for life. We're going to figure out ways to bend that cost curve, but we'll come back to that. But regardless, right? So if we're going to find affordability whatever the solutions are going to be for affordability in the homeowners insurance space, we have to include hail in that conversation. And it really, in my opinion, has to be at the forefront of the conversation. So wildfire is causing availability issues in certain parts of the state, and it is also causing insurance premiums to go up in certain parts of the state too. But everywhere in the state is being impacted by the hail risk that we have in our state. One of the biggest insurers in our state, just to give you all kind of a snapshot of what I'm talking about, one of the biggest insurers in our state, had a conversation with them last month, just about to unpack exactly kind of how they think about the different risks in the state. Wildfire and hail being the two primary ones, obviously. That particular insurance company, and this is directionally true across the board for insurance companies, at least based on the conversations that we've had in Colorado. Nearly 70% of the insurance premium for that particular insurance company was for wind and hail. And that is almost all roofs, right? We're talking about the impact that hail has on roofs and wind has on roofs. So if we're going to talk about affordability solutions, again, I can't stress to you all enough that we have to have hail as a key part of that conversation. Mitigation, Carole knows that she's going to get me up on my soapbox that I will try not to be on for very long. I absolutely agree that mitigation is key, but, and this is a huge but, Right now, I have a very strong opinion that the insurance companies are doing, and not necessarily the insurance companies, but the modeling companies that they use are doing an absolutely terrible job of including the mitigation work that in particular communities and states are doing in order to actually mitigate their communities, their counties. I mean, just think about the easiest example. The fires that we had in the Front Range over the last month, they've been put down. We didn't have the fire that was burning by Carole. The reason why it didn't become a Marshall style event was because of the air resources that the state has invested in over the years. When you talk to these modeling companies, they don't build that. And I'm painting with a broad brush and too broad of a brush when I'm talking about the modeling companies. There's different levels of sophistication, but the biggest ones don't do a good enough job at all of building, and maybe that don't build anything into when we're talking about those kind of wildfire fighting resources into their model. So I've continued to harp about that. Like I said, it's a bit of a soapbox. That was the short version of my soapbox, because I can get very riled up about it. But Commissioner Delcamper, I think you were next.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks, Commissioner, and thanks, Carole, for all the work that you do, and also your willingness to always be available to talk through these issues with us. I have a two-part question. I'm going to try and keep it tight, given the row of hands that are up that I see on the screen. We held a town hall on homeowners insurance about a week or two ago. And Commissioner, we had a number of leaders from your agency who were terrific. And they talked a lot about the work that the division is doing to gather community input and community stories around some of the very themes that we're talking about. One example included a realtor who commented at the town hall that she was showing a home to a potential resident who learned that homeowners insurance would cost $19,000 and then decided that she wasn't going to move to Evergreen, which is bad for our local economy, of course. The other big theme that came out, and neither of these will be a newsflash to you, but I think they're critical in terms of potential legislative remedies in 2025, goes back to this issue of mitigation and the strong concern from homeowners and even communities that are doing really good work around defensible space, mitigation, ignition resistant materials, and more, who are not seeing that count toward the reduction or just even affordable homeowners insurance if they can get it at all. My question is this: one, do you see any remedies to help address these common themes in the upcoming 2025 legislative session? And if so, what might those be? And two, could you, Commissioner, just talk a bit further for the commissioners on this call about how the division is gathering that community feedback, what your timeline is, and how you'll use that information from community members to help tackle some of the issues we've been talking about today? Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I missed that event, Commissioner. We had planned to take my son to Disneyland for his first time before that town hall got scheduled. So I was sad to miss it. But so a lot to unpack there. Let me start with the town halls that we've been doing. So we've been holding a series of town halls. We really started them last fall going into the 2024 legislative session. We then restarted them after the 2024 legislative session, and we're going to roll those into in-person town halls around the state that we're still putting the schedule together on. It's going to be the second half of September and into October, and we'll share that information with CCI, of course, and we're working with CCI to try and partner with you all where we're going to be having some of those town halls. So we've got a lot of feedback. So those town halls, what we were really trying to do is two things. One, we wanted to educate consumers, educate the public about why everything is happening the way that it's happening. Carole touched on a lot of those issues at the front end. It's the reinsurance market. It is the cost of goods. It's the modeling software too. I mean, there's a whole congruence of things that are happening at one time. And to Carole's point, that has made this the toughest market that the tightest market that folks have seen in a generation, in 30 or 40 years. So that was issue number one. But issue number two was we really were trying to push everybody and anybody to come with whatever solutions. And in particular, we wanted to hear from the industry. And when I say the industry, I mean the individual carriers, most that in the best case scenario, but anybody that has any kind of solutions that they want to bring to the table. We haven't had a ton of solutions brought our way. So we've heard a lot from consumers about the challenges like that we've talked about, that Commissioner Mitchell brought up, and a lot of the same types of stories, Commissioner Del Kemper, that you all heard at that town hall a couple of weeks ago about just the basic challenges, right? Those incredibly high insurance rates, the increases, year-over-year increases that are really crushing folks. As far as how all of those stories are going to be used, the interim wildfire committee did have a number of bills that they discussed at their last meeting, or their last hearing, which was, when was that, Carole? Was that last week? I think it was last week.
We were both there. We both testified.
Wasn't there? That was so
like
ours
dogs.
was. That was a few weeks ago when we were both there. But so I think there's going to be legislative solutions through that committee, Commissioner, that will continue to be discussed. We're working to see what we can figure out on our end. Working through our process, and obviously we'll talk with everybody and anybody depending on where exactly we land with our process. But I do think that this is going to be front and center this legislative session, and obviously, if that is the case, regardless of whether it is our agenda bill or it's someone else's agenda bill, we will be part of the conversation and try to steer things in the right direction. Because from my vantage point, right? So from my vantage point, we have to find solutions for the affordability problem, but those solutions have to, at least in part, encourage more competition in the state, right? I want more insurance companies to be going up into Evergreen. Right now, we only have one or two that are willing to write any policies up there. We need to figure out ways to incentivize them to more insurance companies to write everywhere in the state. So that's going to be a focus of kind of our thought process and our thinking, and that'll be where we try and steer things going forward.
And I just wanted to follow up with you, Leslie. It's good to see you. And as you know, I try to be at every table where the industry can talk through these issues, move them forward, serve on the Fire Commission with Leslie, on the HSAC committee, also on the Fair Plan Board. So we are at the table, and I do think we're at a tipping point. And I think the conversation, combined with the market conditions, combined with the escalation of risk, has pushed us to a place where these can't be conversations anymore. We're having the conversations, but we need to start working to some actionable solutions. You know, when it comes to mitigation, we do need to scale that up. It needs to be scaled up, and it needs to be measurable for the insurance companies to find insurability in the mitigation. We know the science shows us that we can reduce the risk if we do it at a personal level and a community level. When we testified before the Wildfire Matters Review Committee, I testified with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They're coming up with a wildfire prepared neighborhood designation. That's something I think that as we work through these issues, we're able to get these designations both at a personal level, a community level. As the commissioner said, we also at a parallel track need to be focused on fortified standards for hail mitigation, because that really is our biggest driver of insurance premiums when it comes to affordability. I met with a modeler this afternoon, a different one, Commissioner, that they're very much on track with this. So I think as the model is catching up with the science, because the modeling for wildfire is still very new compared to the hurricane models, is it something that we're seeing in real time with pressure from regulators like Commissioner Conway and other Western states, is having the modelers also at the table for let's make the mitigation matter, especially if we can scale it up, we can make it measurable, and then we have communities, you know, like we have with Boulder County, where we have wildfire partners in place, and the insurance companies do look at those certifications and use them for insurability on mitigation. We have many other great mitigation programs in place. We know we have some real specific bad pockets in Jeffco. It just is a reality up in Conifer, Bailey, Evergreen. And so as we work toward, you know, all of these solutions, we're able to scale up mitigation, put all our resources toward that. I do think that the modelers are coming along too. Unfortunately, the modelers also work in real time as to looking at real fire events. But at the same time, when we have so much science that shows us that it makes a difference, I do think there's a big emphasis on that. And it is happening at a national level trying to make sure all of these things are starting to intersect. So.
Just one last quick thing on the mitigation front, and then we'll go to Commissioner Hollingsworth. So it's not just fire though, folks. It's hail too, and we know how to mitigate for hail, right? Carole's right that the models are relatively new on wildfire, and I won't get back up on my soapbox about them. I promise. I probably will at some point, but I'll try and keep it short if I do. But we know how to mitigate for hail. We know that we know how to fortify roofs for hail. And there was a comment in the comments about insurance companies needing to be giving credit for the mitigation that happens. Insurance companies are not across the board, but some of the bigger ones are giving significant discounts for hail fortified roofs. So and I think that there very well could be opportunities for us to actually, and this is one of the things that we've talked about during our town halls. There may be opportunities for us to use the hail that comes through our state to our advantage, right? So for example, the hailstorm that hit Central Park earlier this summer. One of the 9 News people tweeted yesterday, and we're in the midst of doing our data call on this, so we don't have the data to confirm that this is true yet, but I will soon enough. He claims that that is actually now essentially a $2 billion storm. It won't surprise me if it actually gets $2 billion. But what that means is that insurance companies right now and for the next year to year and a half are going to be replacing roofs in Central Park. If we could close the gap between what the insurance companies are going to pay to replace the roof with whatever the standard roof was on that home with the hail fortified roof, if we can use state funds in some way or some funds and grant funds, I don't really care where we get the money, to help people fortify their roofs, not only will they see a decrease in their premiums if they have the right insurance company that has mitigation discounts for hail fortified roofs, it will change the claim curve for hail in that particular part of the state. And if we can do it broad enough, we'll start to change the claim curve for hail across the state. That will have substantial impacts on people's affordability. So that's what I talked about. When we're talking about that we have to focus on, or when I'm talking about that we have to focus on hail, it's across the board. It's mitigation too. But I said I was going to keep it short and then I went long. So Commissioner Hollingsworth, I'll kick it to you.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to kind of echo some of what is being said, but maybe in a little different way. So we're one of the counties that's in the process of updating our community wildfire protection plan. And I know a lot of communities and counties are around us with the hope that we will be able to get mitigation, Forest Service mitigation money for the community. So that's good. So we just had a town hall a couple weeks ago. And one thing that I've been explaining to with the mitigation that we're doing as a county on right-of-ways is that's really to increase egress. So the firefighters can get in and the people can get out. And people, sometimes they'll understand that a little bit more than, taking down trees. But I had some questions. So I'll just throw them all out there. One is, and another thing that we're hearing is at first, people were saying they might have to move because of their property insurance. Now the story is because of their property taxes. Now the story is it's the insurance. So we really have had an increase of homes go on the market, and that seems to be a common thread. And so I know that there are efforts to create the pool and do that legislation, but that will be at a cost. So that's not going to solve the affordability part of the solution, just the availability part. Other feedback that people say is that the coverage they sign up for is not the coverage they get when they have any disaster. And I know there was legislation that if you live in certain areas, you get more of a guarantee, but it wasn't a blanket coverage. So people in our little county aren't in the areas. We're sandwiched between Grand County, Boulder County, Jeffco, which have all had major fires. So our time is coming. We know that, especially since we're a high recreation use county. So some other things that people have mentioned is that some people get a cancellation warning and then they don't have a clear timeline of a response. And then sometimes they get a cancellation notice, you're going to be dropped, but they're not receiving them in a certain amount of time to give them any time to act. So my question for you is, I understand there's supposed to be some kind of process where they get this warning or cancellation notice in a certain time period, but the reality is that people are not getting them. They're getting them very close to the cancellation date, which of course causes panic. And sometimes they can't find another insurer, and certainly not one that they can easily afford. And then I was glad that you mentioned about the mitigation. You know, we're all hot on mitigation, right? But I had wondered if there could be or are incentives for homeowners who do mitigation. Because what I find that I hear up here, and I know it's our own experience, even if the insurer says, we might drop you, you know, just giving you a heads up, we might drop you, there doesn't seem to be an on-site visit. They say there's going to
I think we may have lost Commissioner. Oh, there you are. You're on mute now. Commissioner Hollingsworth, you are on mute.
Yeah, so our internet is not great either. So anyway, I think those were mostly my things about so it's about if there's any incentives for mitigation and for the homeowners to reduce their insurance costs, the cancellation warning and notice timelines that you have as an industry standard, and then when people don't, their coverage doesn't cover the actual costs that they incur for any type of disaster. Those are my main things, I guess. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, let me take them in kind of reverse order. So, Commissioner, you said that there's the bills that have passed over the last couple of years don't apply to your area. That's not correct. So the bills that we've passed over the last few years are applicable statewide. What you may be running into is that typically the legislation is focused on owner occupied homes. So if some of the folks if the owner occupied in primary residence, if it's not their primary residence, if they're not owner occupied homes, the legislation may not apply, and that might be what you're hearing, but it absolutely, the legislation of, like I said, that we've passed over the last few years, they do apply statewide. As far as I think you're referring to an underinsurance problem. We know, and this is true throughout the country, but it's certainly true in the West, and it gets exacerbated, obviously, as affordability challenges creep up. We know that that people throughout the state they don't have enough insurance coverage to replace their home if they lose it. A number of people don't. We did a study out of the Marshall Fire, and it was most likely, it's a little bit hard to calculate how many people were underinsured, but it was someplace from anything from a third of the folks that lost their homes were underinsured all the way up to maybe as much as 2/3 of the folks. And there were big swings for individual homeowners of how much underinsurance that they had. So that's why we passed another bill to put kind of tighter constraints around the estimating software that insurance companies use, so that we are hopefully getting consumers better information about what they actually need to have coverage, the amount of coverage that they need if they do end up having to rebuild if they lose their home. As far as the non-renewal notice component is concerned, we have state laws on the non-renewal notices. It's either 30 or 60 days, and I can never remember which one it is. Carole, is it 30?
Commissioner, part of 1174 was to increase it from 30 to 60.
That's why I can't remember.
You
So
guys,
it's 60
we did
days.
increase the notification. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's 60 days now. That's not a ton of time for people to shop around. I get that, Commissioner. I think that there very well could be conversations in the future to increase that even further. That will have challenges on the insurance company's front. At some point, you get to a tipping point where it almost becomes not counterintuitive, but counterproductive for those timelines to get extended further and further out, because what ends up happening is you have insurance companies sending out notices in order to protect themselves if they do want a non-renew, and then they change their minds, and it leads to even more confusion for folks. So there could be conversations, Commissioner, but we just, as Carole said, we just extended that in 1174, and I think it may make some sense to see how that plays out for consumers before we engage back into that conversation. I feel like I'm missing one of your issues.
Just
Well,
one other
so
thing,
I was just gonna
Commissioner.
ask,
I do have one other answer for you on 1174. To your concerns about underinsurance is there are now mandatory offers for more insurance out of that. And they're on the deck page. There's a separate notice where they have to be offered 50% of extended replacement cost coverage. They have to be offered 20% of law and ordinance cover and also inflation guard. And the division has also new regulations that outline how those are put on notices. So one of Representative Amable's big concerns is that people understand the coverage they're buying. So I think that having people have the ability to purchase more coverage, understand that they need to consider that. I think that was a big step forward with the underinsurance bill as well. So.
Mhm. So my follow-up on Mr. Conway, so when people are saying they didn't receive a letter in that 60-day time period, who's their best remedy on that? Because that's really what it is.
If you, I'll put our website and my cell phone number in the chat here, so you all have it. But they go to our website, doi.colorado.gov, and file a complaint there. There's an easy file complaint button, and they can reach out to us, and we can help them. All right, I think we're on to Commissioner Waters.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Commissioner Conway and Carole, for joining us. It's really, really important conversation and really informative. I think something that it's important to note, I know that we keep talking about, large scale mitigation and, work that can be done to create more fire-wise communities. And, I think the struggle that we experience a lot here in Summit County is that we have been highly active in mitigation work for the last decade or so. And we, for example, in 2018, we had the Buffalo Mountain Fire. And during that time, the only thing one of the main reasons that fire was stopped was because of the mitigation, the fuel reduction work that we did. And we had a fire break that stopped that fire from dropping into one of our most populous neighborhoods. And yet somehow those residents who live in that area, which we refer to as wilderness, are still receiving 150 to 200% increases in their insurance. And then in addition to that, just science, utilizing science and utilizing all of the work, hail is very rare at above 9,000 feet. So I think that's another issue that we kind of want to help or would like for the insurance companies to better understand. It feels like they're painting with a very broad brush. And so on these different, issues, and in a community like mine where we have really taken a lot of steps forward, it still feels like that's not enough. So what is enough, I think, is the question that I'd like to pose. And it's not necessarily a question, but more just like a comment that if we can share that with you to bring that along, because I think that that's where our residents are really struggling, because we have a free chipping program. We've got wildfire breaks. We work with the U.S. Forest Service. We've done so much work, and it still feels like that's not enough to provide support for our residents to get the insurance they need to stay in their homes. So that's kind of maybe less of a soapbox for me to get off of, but but it's one of those things that if you have anything to add, or if there's any thoughts, or if this is a conversation, I'd love to hear more.
Commissioner Conway, Commissioner Waters, I'll start. I work very closely with Summit, and you guys do fantastic work up there. That's what I said, we've got some great community mitigation programs that have been in place for a long time. They're evolving as the science evolves. They're basing it on the IBHS science, which is what the insurance industry recognized. That's why I say I really feel like we're at the tipping point of even talking to, how can we get the counties and partnering with the designation for wildfire prepared home and wildfire prepared neighborhood to have the insurance companies have the information the understanding, and the acceptance of the measurable work that you're doing. And then there's an on-site inspection and a re-inspection of those homes. That's part of that designation. So I think that the counties that are doing the good work, it's not for naught. I think now as we've reached that tipping point of how do we really report that up to the companies, that it is scalable, it's measurable, it can be taken into consideration of the modeling. I think that's a juncture that we're at. So of course, there's going to be some high-risk homes, depending on their slope, depending on their access, a lot of different factors that are going to still put them in a high-risk category, in a high premium category. But I really hope, and I've spent a lot of my days, nights not sleeping, and days trying to figure out how can we get better designations on these programs? How can we make it measurable? How can we make it scalable? And how can we have it make a difference for you? So I think that your counties are working very hard on that, and we need to find a way to push it forward. I mean, I'm just being really honest. I think that that's where we're at.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, the reason why, and I've been very vocal about the modeling issues for over a year now. Talk to the press whenever anybody calls and wants to talk about homeowners insurance. I make sure that that is at the forefront of the conversation with the press, because those issues that you're talking about, Commissioner, are exactly my concern and my frustration. So, and I do think, to Carole's point from before, it's going to take all of the tools in the toolbox to address the affordability challenge that we have in the state. And there's different issues for different parts of the state. You're absolutely right, Commissioner Waters. Up where you all hail's not the issue. It's not the issue that's driving the affordability challenges. From my vantage point, a significant part of that are the models, and making sure that we're getting the models, to Carole's point, as scientifically accurate as possible. And that means that they have to figure out ways to include the mitigation work the communities are doing. But it is also the case that, and Carole was right about this too, that the insurance companies in Colorado have been hit hard over the last more than a decade, but 8 of the last 11 years, they've had loss ratios over $1. And what that means is that for every $1 of premium that their insurance company is bringing in, they're paying out more than $1. Insurance companies will tell you that they need to take, so that in order to be somewhat profitable, they need to be below 80 cents for the claims that they're paying for every $1 that they actually bring in. So they've gotten their butts kicked over the last 11 years. And that's why you see those insurance premiums going up as much as they are. So we have to figure out ways to encourage mitigation in all sorts of different ways. We have to figure out ways to bend the cost curve, and then make sure that we are passing those savings on to consumers.
And then I
Just
have one
more
other quick
on that.
follow-up.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I just needed to share my truth when it came to this. That's really where, I just wanted to stress it one more time. Something else that I was wondering, and maybe you guys know the answer to this, or maybe Katie does, with Bill 1174, is with the extended requirement for insurers to be able to, or they need to give more time in order for residents, 60 days maybe. Is there any requirement for these insurers to provide, once the FAIR plan, for instance, once the FAIR plan rolls out, is it required for those insurers to offer hey, this is the, just like when an employer, you lose your employee health insurance, they're required to offer you COBRA insurance, or required to at least make you aware. Are there any requirements in 1174 that have that?
No. And so keep in mind too, that, and Carole touched on this from before, that we really do want the FAIR plan to be that insurer of last resort. So we don't want people to flock to it. It's not going to be the best coverage in the world. If they have other options available to them, which the vast majority of people in the state will, even if they are non-renewed by insurance company A, they will have other options available for them. It'll be better for that homeowner to go to the other insurance company. And it's incredibly important for us to not, so that we don't want the FAIR plan to become a competitor with the market. And the reason why I say that, folks, and the reason why I've stressed over and over and over again when we go out and talk about the FAIR plan that it isn't going to be an affordability solution, is because what Carole touched on at the beginning, the FAIR plan is funded through assessments on the insurance companies in the market. So if we have homeowners that are being insured by the FAIR Plan and we have a huge event where the FAIR Plan has a lot of loss, we need a robust market for the FAIR Plan to be able to go out and assess the insurance company so that they can then pay the claims that they're going to have coming in the door. Ideally, we'll get to the point where premium is sustainable, and the FAIR Plan has built up reserves, but we need that robust market in order to actually be able to make the FAIR Plan work. So that's the medium answer, not necessarily short answer of why, Commissioner, that requirement isn't in place.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I think what I'm getting at is I think it needs to be easier for residents. In addition to giving us more time, those residents giving them more time, there's got to be a way where we can make this easier for residents to find new insurance. You know, working full time, being a parent, etc., on top of losing your insurance is a surefire way to drive someone crazy. And so I think it's important to figure out what other tools we should be able to give our residents, you know, in addition to just an additional amount of time. And that's all I kind of wanted to share.
You know, and Commissioner, to that point, I think an education piece is part of this. We're talking about this as the FAIR Plan Board with our new executive director is part of, you know, educating people on how to shop, giving them tools. We've had a lot of discussions with the Division of Insurance about what more can we do to educate consumers of, they shop with one insurance company they've always shopped with. And I've heard from people, it's like, well, I shopped around and I got a lower rate, a much lower rate. I didn't realize. So I think that we're very focused, and I know the Division of Insurance is as well, as the industry and along with the FAIR Plan is, how can we give people more tools to make better purchasing decisions, to understand what to do when they get that scary non-renewal notice? We take that as a huge responsibility. I think you guys would be a huge distribution channel for us to be able to get more information in your hands to help your constituents. So I think that that's very top on the priority list. We're even talking about like training videos, little things we can offer agents. But I think we can offer you tools too, as we roll out the FAIR Plan of what it is, what it isn't, what are other shopping opportunities, what's a surplus lines market that might be a better option for you. So I take very much to heart that question. So thank you.
Commissioner Porter Norton.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, I have to jump off in about 2 minutes, so I'm going to keep my comment really brief because I know we have a couple other commissioners that would like to weigh in. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. This is really helpful. I want to make a point to maybe offer a solution based on what you said, Commissioner Conway. We have a science-based nonprofit here called Mountain Studies Institute, and we have a very collaborative partnership with the city of Durango and Durango Fire. We're on the western slope, so I know the Front Range has been talked about, and all our communities are very different. So what we did is looking at broad scale mitigation and planning on a entire landscape level scale, and it's mapped. And so where the mitigation is happening goes on the map. And we would be happy to share the technology for those that know GIS. It's not that hard, but to your point, Commissioner Conway, about really drilling down into where mitigation is happening, we think we have a pretty good start at what that could look like. So the modelers could say, I'm writing a policy here, what does it look like? And it's not perfect yet, but happy to share that. If I have a few seconds here, I'll put it in the chat. But if we could somehow standardize that, as you said, Ms. Walker, you know, scale that up across Colorado, because yes, it's very frustrating to hear that our community is doing everything we possibly can, except for putting in place a WUI code. And the only reason we're not doing that is we're waiting for the state. But we have a nonprofit, we have subdivisions, we have CWPPs, we have 29 neighborhood CWPPs, we have a composting company, it goes on and on what La Plata County's doing. Our own county has done a wildfire resource center, a wildfire advisory board. But to think that we would put all this time into it and then we get these stories about insurance premiums, it's very demoralizing. So I just want to put the mapping on the map for a solution, because we're doing it. So I don't know if you
met with your fire marshal up in Durango. It's very
You're
impressive.
what?
So I've met with the fire marshal up in Durango, and it's very impressive. So that's absolutely the kind of work we need to model after. So absolutely would love to hear about that.
Me too.
Star, you are up.
Jameson, and I'm the Natural Resources and Climate Resilience Director. And I work for San Miguel County. I can attest that we also have started a wildfire collaborative and all the things that were just mentioned from the previous commissioner. And we most recently have given a lot of money to a nonprofit to give free home assessments for wildfire mitigation. And every conversation that we have with them, you know, as everyone has sort of mentioned, there is no guarantee that any of these actions are that they're going to take are actually going to do anything, you know, for their insurance costs are being dropped. A lot of these people just want to save their house. And so with that being said, each homeowner's insurance provider seems to keep a secret their criteria for determining how wildfire risk and potential mitigation remedies play in determining, one, whether or not a policy can be written or given property, and B, what the premiums will be for that said policy. So with all that being said, I appreciate this legislation on, you know, a different insurance policy, but what's your position on any potential legislation that would require insurance providers to disclose their criteria so that, you know, we as local governments and special districts and nonprofits, we can help educate the homeowners on what they need to do in respect to mitigation?
Yeah, Star. So I think as a general rule, more transparency is a good thing because it does give folks the ability to make those types of decisions and get information out to their community that will help the community members actually make the decisions that they need to make. That's actually the where California started. So California now does have requirements in place for insurance companies to have mitigation discounts, but that they started a number of years ago just with a transparency push to make sure that insurance companies were telling the department and making it public what they were giving mitigation discounts for. And what they found was, and these are rough numbers, they're not exactly right, but they're directionally right. When they started that transparency push, it was about 30% of the companies were providing mitigation discounts. By the time they then went and passed their legislation a number of years later that required mitigation discounts, it was closer to 70% of the companies were giving mitigation discounts. So it became a conversation about making sure that the playing field was even in California. I think the insurers have some challenges and some frustrations with the way that California has done some of the work that they've done over the years. But at a base level, I do think that transparency on mitigation discounts in particular is a good thing. And it's something that I think we would be interested in having conversations about.
And I do think that what I tell people is what the insurance companies want is the IBHS standards. And California did work with the IBHS. What they did is they piecemeal it out. It has to be a systems approach. So as we're looking at both parcel level mitigation and community level mitigation, it has to be not one thing. It has to be what we call the wildfire prepared home designation, will now be the wildfire prepared neighborhood. And it has to be that systems approach. I think where we're sort of missing that is you're doing great things in La Plata, you're doing great things in Summit, you're doing great things in Boulder, is having them recognizable with a common designation. That's why I'm so much on board with, I think that is a next step for us to try to get there. So it's recognizable to the insurance companies who all support IBHS. So I think that's one direction we're going. One of the newer modelers that I met with this afternoon, along with Kelly Campbell, who's the new Fairpine executive director, they could show us in their model a house in Boulder with a zip code, and you could look at the mitigation and how it affected the score. And you could look at if you changed this thing, how it could improve your score if you took this brush away. So I think that there's a lot of good technology on the horizon, work even being done in the modeling space. So again, we're gonna, with Commissioner Conway, gonna continue to have those conversations, but I think that everything you're saying, I understand and agree with. We need to figure out a way, again, to have everybody on the same page, right? Make it scalable, make it measurable, make it recognizable to the insurance companies where they truly believe that things are happening in a community and a parcel level. They're science-based that need to happen. So again, applaud all the work you're doing. I think we need to figure out a way to make sure that we're all more on the same page with how that impacts you guys, both from a risk reduction and an insurance standpoint.
Right. We, we have a certification process that's free for homeowners and HOAs, and we modeled it off of Boulder County, but it's a lot more work for us to figure out what you guys want, what the insurance companies want. So we're just throwing it out there, and hoping that it catches on. So it would be nice, working together and it not be in this silo or secretive situation that, that's understood and that we're doing the good work that's going to work on the ground.
Tim Webster has worked hard to get the underwriters on board with what he's doing, and they get it. So they recognize Wildfire Partners. You're modeling after that. You're doing the on-site inspections. They're comprehensive. They're based on, those are all the right things. So I think it is something that we all need to start working toward, of how to make that more recognizable and measurable.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Clyde Church, La Plata County Commissioner. Just want to applaud the IVHS standards, but would like to also see some guidance on IVHS +1, +2, +3. More advanced and more aggressive fire mitigation, not standards. I use the wrong word. Should be just guidance, thoughts, risk reductions. I think the counties have a burden here to help pass building codes and land use codes that reduce risk for our residents. I realize that some of these mitigation measures for hail may include enclosures over parking areas for condos, apartments. By requiring coverage for hail, we might be able to reduce premiums in the whole county or the whole region. And I think not only applies to the mountain regions for fire and hail, but also to coastal regions where there's sea level rising for more turbulent storms, doing more property damage. And I think we need to get on the side of looking at this from counties. How can we reduce risk from the insurance company to save premiums? That's, I think, a very important dimension that we really haven't talked about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
There's Commissioner Stolzman.
And I will have to leave at some point because I have to go to my HOA board meeting that I'm on the board of, but
Thanks
so much. Thanks so much for meeting with us. I know we're probably out of time. I just, Carole, I work with Jim Webster. I'm a commissioner in Boulder County, and just thanks for all the positive things you said about him. I'll tell him. That's really nice.
he knows that I think he should be like the mitigation czar.
He's great. He is. That's basically his title up here. And so I just, I know it can be really frustrating when we're putting a lot of effort in and not seeing the returns, but in our county, there's so much risk and we're putting in a lot of effort. We have as many programs as you can imagine. And still, there was a fire in Lyons and a lot of things, but we've seen that the mitigation really makes a difference in protecting our firefighters. We truly believe if you look at the aftermath of the fire in Lyons, you can see a house that had been a participant in Wildfire Partners and the way that it burned and didn't burn that home down when it did the neighboring homes that were not mitigated. So we do see benefits, but then still there can be 100-mile-an-hour winds, and you have something that happened in my community with the Marshall Fire where an urban conflagration can happen. So there's still a lot of risk. And I think that's what's so hard for community members is that we all are trying so hard, but with climate change and other things, the risks are increasing and costs are increasing. And so we're seeing some really devastating effects from that. And so when I hear the commissioner say, you really need to look at impact resistant shingles, the type 4 shingles, What I would really like to understand is for those claim curves for hail, if we did that, let's say, how extensively would we need to do that in order to see the reduction in rates? And how can we look at those claim curves? Is it everything east of the Continental Divide? Is it everything? I mean, and then you also hear what Commissioner Waters is saying is like some areas don't really experience hail. So is it really the whole state? Is it a portion of the state? And how could we get that information? Because each time I talk to the insurance agencies, they all talk about hail and the cost of hail, and to reduce their payouts, their actuarial risk, they really need us to address hail.
Yeah, so Commissioner, I think it's fair to say that it's everything east. It's the Front Range and east that has the biggest impact from hail. You also we see it hit the southwest part of the state as well. But it's really kind of those population centers along the I-25 corridor that get hammered. But it's two different ways that I think we have the potential to actually save people money when it comes to hail mitigation. So that insurer that I was talking about before, that it's roughly 70% of their on average throughout the state, 70% of their premium is because of hail risk. They also have about a 50% reduction in that portion of the premium if you have a hail resistant roof. So there's going to be real world savings for the individual consumer that fortifies their roof. Again, that's not necessarily true across the board with all insurers, but I think the more that we build transparency to the question from before into the market about where mitigation discounts are happening, I think we'll incentivize that. We'll incentivize the competition side of things from insurer to increase those types of mitigation discounts. Longer term, right? I think we'd have to, if we're talking about truly bending the kind of claims curve, the cost curve from hail claims in particular, we'd have to fortify a substantial portion of the state. But I think we can get there, right? I mean, it's a matter of if we put our minds to it, if we put our resources behind it, longer term, I do think that we can start to have a meaningful impact from really fortifying roofs. And that's what really, that would be the focus, or potentially one of the focuses of trying to save people money when it comes to their homeowners insurance costs.
Yeah, we talked about Alabama and North Carolina. That was a crisis on the coast, and they have been able to, through a granting program for mitigation for wind, bring down their risk, bring down their premiums. So there are examples of this working out there. And also, I mean, when you look at really only the western slope and parts of the mountain community, like Summit type, are the only ones that are really like don't get the damaging hail. It's the northern corridors where you guys are from southeast. I have Wyoming, from southeast Wyoming down through the northern corridor, as the commissioner said, through the Front Range into southern Colorado, and unfortunately big population centers, but also the Eastern Plains. So what we're talking about with the fortified roofing too is, even if we can replace one replacement cycle for someone, that will help them with non-renewals for multiple hail claims. So if someone is replacing their roof once every 7 or 10 years instead of every 3 years, and that's an insurance claim, that could have a huge impact, just not for that individual homeowner, not to have to file a claim and have their roof saved, but also for, as the commissioner said, if we can broaden that out, that could have a substantial impact on what is our largest insured catastrophe payout in Colorado.
The last piece, and then I've got to run because I got to get my boy to soccer practice. I am a firm believer that if states start investing in fortifying roofs against hail, the states where hail hits, you're going to start to see the technology on the roofing technology improve vastly. Right now, to Carole's point, the technology that's out there now, instead of replacing your roof after every significant hail event, you're replacing your roof after every third significant hail event, maybe after every 2. But that's going to improve, and we will, if we can incentivize that, and we would incentivize that if we were investing through the state, or if states were investing in fortifying roofs. I think we could move things exceptionally fast. And then we really will, right? That, again, folks, that is, from my vantage point, that is from an affordability standpoint, in the vast majority of the state, that is the most important thing to do. But thank you all very much. I apologize. I do have to run. I did put my cell phone number in the chat. I think you all have access to I'm sure you have access to my email, so I didn't throw that in there. But reach out if you want to talk about anything, and I will be in some of your neighborhoods very soon.
And thank you, Commissioner. And Katie, I can also just send you some link to some background or some information that may be good follow-up information for the commissioner. So thank you all very much for your time. We know what an important audience you are. So thank you for all you're doing.
Take care, folks.
Thank you.
Bye.